Welcome in and welcome back to the Cubbies Crib podcast. Jake, we are coming off a sweep of the New York Mets. We'll get to that in a second. I think that's a big potential turning point for this Cubs team. As has been the case with most of these episodes, we have to talk about the pitching staff. We have to talk about injuries. We were watching the game on, was it Tuesday night? I think Edward Cabrera was starting. Was it Tuesday night?
Tuesday night.
Yeah, we were watching the game on Tuesday night. Edward Cabrera was starting. He looked really good. At times looked shaky. He made a fantastic defensive play in the fifth inning. And then things very much did not look okay. He very much tried to will himself up, tried to fight through the pain, but it was clear there was pain. He eventually went back to the ground. He had to be carted off the field. The Cubs confirmed it was a moderate hamstring strain. They haven't placed a timeline on his return. Honestly, if we get him back before September, that seems like a victory. And then on the heels of Cabrera being placed on the IL, the very same day out of nowhere, Ben Brown lands on the IL with a neck strain, which is a very concerning diagnosis for Ben Brown, concerning how his 2024 season ended. Jake, how are the Cubs going to manage the pitching staff, at least until the All-Star break?
You know it's bad when reporters ask counsel about even before the Brown announcement, just at Cabrera, and he was getting asked about this, and he's like, "It's rough right now." And it's like when a big league manager admits like it's bad, like this is not good. Normally they have this like politically correct, non-committal answer about like, well, this is an opportunity for guys to step up and earn a spot in the rotation. I mean, there's none of that anymore. Counsel is beyond words. It is very much a just survive day by day thing. And you just have to, they just have the All Star break in Philly circled as just survive until then. I think baseball as a whole is totally shocked the Cubs are in the playoff hunt still, given this merry-go-round of injuries. The Cabrera one, like, didn't really shock me. It's like not it was a fluky play. Like, don't get me wrong, there's nothing he could have done to avoid that. But it's like, okay, the guy that we traded for who has a checkered health past got hurt again. Okay, no big deal. But then to wake up the next day to the Ben Brown thing, it's just like, golly, this is rough. Well, I'm sure we'll get into it a little bit later. But then you just look at this weekend in a huge series in Milwaukee, and you look at the Brewers, who have their three studs lined up, and then you flip to the other page and you look at the Cubs, TBD, and Colin Ray, and it just tells you where we're at right now. It's just hope and pray. And really, now the onus is back on the offense. Like, you're going to need to hang some crooked numbers to give the team a chance to win because everyone in the pitching staff is going to be overworked, probably overmatched in terms of who they're pitching against. Um, but yeah, somehow we're still here. We're still in the playoff hunt, and we're coming off a sweep. I can't explain it, but I'll take it.
I do have to give Jed Hoyer some credit because when the back-to-back injuries happened to Cabrera and Brown, it became very clear that the Cubs had to do something. They had to make a trade of some sort. As we say this time of year, the problem with that is that you're almost always going to overpay. And when that becomes part of the discussion, that seems to be where Hoyer draws the line and relies on his own internal depth. As we've found out over the past month, the Cubs really don't have that internal depth anymore. And I think that's why we did see Hoyer probably step outside his comfort zone, give up a prospect who is trending towards being an organizational top 10 prospect in Cole Mathis to the Mets for David Peterson, a former All Star. He's had checkered numbers since the second half of last year. The beginning of this year also hasn't looked good. That being said, he's a notorious ground ball pitcher. He's perfect at generating weak contact. He doesn't give up home runs. And as we saw this week playing the Mets, the defense that was behind him was very spotty. For that reason, I do have to applaud Jed Hoyer as much as it goes against my sensibilities because, in terms of finding an upside pitcher, he could have done far worse than David Peterson.
Oh, absolutely. You could have ended up settling for a Taiwan Walker or something like that. With Peterson, like you said, there is at least the reason to believe there could be something in there. I mean, he's 12 months removed from being an all star. give me a guy who keeps the ball in the yard and keeps the ball on the ground, and I feel like that's a good recipe for success. And he's a rental. Again, we'll deal with 2027 when we get there. Let's just survive 26. But yeah, I feel like the upside is there. And to your point, there's no other option. There is no internal option. Some of the minor league deals that they brought in, guys are hurt. Brandon Birdsell isn't pitching this year. Jackson Wiggins is just starting to make minor league rehab starts. I looked, Tyler Beat gave up 6 runs in 2/3 of an inning last night for Iowa. Like the guys you brought in hoping maybe they could step in and help, just either are hurt or aren't producing. We know the Jordan Wicks story. We don't need to rehash that. So for me, it was like a pretty solid pickup for as early and as far out from the trade deadline as we are. I thought Jed did a nice job.
Yeah, these are the type of trades that when you expect a team to make an early trade, this is kind of what you see. You see a Mets team that's on the verge of selling. I think the Mets could be another trade partner for the Cubs before the deadline. Once we're talking about the Freddie Peraltas of the world, maybe they get willing to deal one of those two relievers they have at the back of the bullpen. But for a Cubs team that simply needed a guy to take the ball every 5 days, they had to make this trade. As you said, we were getting ready. Well, I think we did. Yeah, we were getting ready to run pieces on Taiwan Walker and Chris Paddock being potential options for this Cubs rotation. So if we're talking about David Peterson or one of those two, give me Peterson every time. I feel confident that at the very least, Peterson is going to be better than he was with the Mets. I don't think he's going to be a clear answer for the rotation. I just think having seen what we saw from the Mets over this past week, it's clear what was going on during his run in the Mets rotation. And at the very least, we do know that the Cubs are going to play defense, and that should in itself help him for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I was talking to Mets fans, and everyone I talked to was just ecstatic they got anything for Peterson, given how he's pitched in the last 12 months. But again, maybe it's just stupid Cub fan optimism that we're drinking the Kool-Aid. But I think there's upside here. I think again, we're not asking him to be an ace. We're not asking him to be an all-star. Just give the Cubs a chance to win every 5 days, and we're good. Like that's more than what we have right now. I know, like when Cabrera went down and Brown went down, I went on Roster Resource, and Roster Resource is quick to update things. And we were at the point where there was only 3 starters listed on Roster Resource. There was Colin Ray, Javier Assad, and Shota Imanaga. And even Roster Resource couldn't formulate how you were going to fill out that rotation. So David Peterson will probably get thrown right into the fire this weekend in Milwaukee. Welcome, welcome to the Cubs. But yeah, I'm optimistic. But again, like we really only have one direction to go, as opposed to relying on another Jordan Wicks spot start.
Yeah. One thing I felt confident in after the Cabrera and Brown injuries is that we wouldn't see Jordan Wicks again. I doubt we actually see him with the Cubs pitching at the major league level again, unless everyone on the pitching staff is hurt. It just seems like very much like Kevin Alcantara, his bed is kind of made in terms of what the Cubs think of him, and they truly will only go to him if they're very much desperate and on their last limbs. Some could argue they are. That being said, you had David Peterson in. You mentioned the Cubs fan optimism that usually comes with a trade or an addition like this. Certainly true. There's also legitimate data that would point to Peterson being better. He had a ERA over 6 with the Mets, but if you look at his fielder independent pitching, it was 3.48. So that in itself is a sign that he was just extremely unlucky. Again, he's not going to come in and immediately be the all-star that he was during the first 2 months of the 2025 season. But if he's a pitcher that gives you an ERA around 3.5, hovering around 4, that's a major win for what the Cubs need right now. And hopefully it's the lifeline that the Cubs need until the All-Star break, because then that's when we're talking about Jameson Taillon potentially coming back, maybe a more concrete update on what we could expect from Edward Cabrera and if he's starting to resume his throwing program. Unfortunately, with Ben Brown, I would be surprised if we see him the rest of the season, knowing how the 2024 neck thing ended out. I just don't feel confident that the Cubs are going to rush him back. And we also got confirmation this past week that Justin Steele, when he comes back, will be pitching out of the bullpen, assuming he does make his return at all this season. So getting to the All-Star break is crucial for the Cubs because if you can at least stay afloat, then you have the trade deadline within your sight. And then that's when you talk about, hey, we have Pedro Ramirez. He's shown that he's a major league player over the last 2 months. Let's use him to try to get a more higher option for the rotation and truly cement ourselves in the wild card race.
Yeah, I think, with the trade deadline being pushed back a little bit this year too, I think that's advantageous to the Cubs because they're very much on that line of do you put your chips in or not? And I think the next 3 weeks are that's going to tell the story. But again, the one thing you can't do is come off a sweep of the Mets, go to Milwaukee, and get swept this weekend. So you would just erase all the momentum you have. You can't. Gotta at least get one. Hopefully, win a series. But they'll face a tall task there. Again, you want to get to the break, but it's not like the break is going to give us definitive answers. I agree with you. I'd be shocked if Brown pitches again this year. You and I have said for more than a month that we would be surprised if Steele was a meaningful contributor. So obviously, we got that confirmation. Tyone, you never really know what you're going to get. He's been up and down this year, so I know it will be nice to just have healthy arms, and I get that. But also on the other hand, it's like okay, but we still need that upside. If you're going to make the playoff push, if you want to solidify yourself as a team that's going to play in October for a second straight year, you've got to find higher upside arms, and it can't be roll of the dice guys. It's got to be a guy you can plug in. He's going to win games for you, and he's going to show up in the postseason.
Yeah, I also think we do have to recalibrate our expectations for what to expect from the Cubs approaching the trade deadline. I know when the Cubs were clearly looking like the best team in the National League, the clear favorite in the National League Central, it became very easy to dream about like, hey, what would a Tarek Skubal trade package look like? Maybe for Eddie Peralta. I think we definitely have to rule that out from their conversation this year. I think their additions will be pretty close to what they did last summer. As much as I hated what they did last summer, that's just kind of the bed they're in. And to be clear, why I hated last summer is because the Cubs were in a position to chase the first round bye, and they very much just plugged gaps instead of really asserting themselves as the true favorites. This season, they have to plug gaps to kind of just get a healthy enough pitching staff to get them to October. So I think this is where you see maybe another lower end starting pitcher than a couple of arms for the bullpen. Because for as much as we focus on the starting rotation during the first half of this pod, there's no go-to options in the bullpen right now. Who knows when Daniel Palencia will be back? So at the very least, the Cubs have to bring in another established veteran for that group. And when you're talking about maybe two bullpen arms, maybe a starting pitcher, that's going to cost a lot of prospects. And as we've also touched on, the Cubs farm system isn't exactly in a healthy spot to be making all these deals.
Yeah, the deal that I keep noodling over and talking to people about, and I think it's like the ceiling of what we can expect is a one-stop shop. You go to the Red Sox, you go get Aroldis Chapman and Sonny Gray. That to me is like the high bar of what we can expect. Maybe again, we know the Red Sox are in trouble, so maybe and there's the familiarity with Breslow there, at least for now. Um, so I think if you can find a team like that where you can check two boxes in one deal, maybe the Cubs can stretch their farm system a little bit more. Maybe it's a Matt Shaw, maybe it's a Kevin Alcantara, Pedro Ramirez, like you said. So I think that's the high water mark. There's no Tarek Skubal. I'd be shocked if there was a Freddie Peralta. Again, you like the idea of reuniting him with Council. You don't love what he's done in New York this year. He hasn't looked like the same pitcher at all. Um, yeah, again, this season's been so up and down. It feels premature to even speculate what late July, early August is going to look like because we could have another 10-game winning streak and 10-game losing streak by then. But I think the high water mark would be somebody like a Sonny Gray and a Aroldis Chapman because, like you said, the bullpen is a huge question mark right now. Last night Jacob Webb looked great. That changeup was nasty, but you look at him and then you look on the other side of the lineup card. And what Luke Weaver did to the Cubs in the eighth inning last night was just humiliating. Those were brutal swings, brutal ABs from the Cubs, and the Cubs don't have anybody like that right now. So if you could pry a Luke Weaver away, I mean, I wanted Luke Weaver last winter. Instead, we got Phil Maton. Um, you know, that's life. But we need some more arms in the pen because even if Palencia comes back, that's one guy. You need more reliable guys.
Yeah, once again, just going to tap the sign. Maybe you save that 6 million you spent on Hunter Harvey and just put it in a multi-year offer for Luke Weaver. We know the Cubs were interested in him. They just didn't match the Mets offer. Maybe they should have. Well, they definitely should have, just based off of how the
Well,
bullpen is
you
looking.
could really take that 6 million because what was Bieber's deal? Yeah, 2 and 22. There you go. That's the difference. You
Yeah,
take
yeah.
John Harvey or Weaver. So
Yeah, let's talk about those Mets. Jake, I was conflicted through this whole 4 game set because the Cubs fan in me wants the Cubs to be back. Like nothing beats when the Cubs truly are back, when they're rolling. And for these 4 games against the Mets, it certainly looked like they were back. Nico was hitting doubles. Dansby Swanson was getting RBI after RBI. Pete was doing his things. It truly felt like this could be a turning point for the Cubs. That being said, across the field, it also looked like maybe the Mets are just that bad. They had 6 errors on Wednesday night. They had another 2 errors on Thursday. Who knows what's going on with the pitching staff? They just fired Carlos Mendoza. Are the Cubs back on their way to being back, or was this week just a case of the Mets just being bad?
I mean, nobody likes to say the Cubs are back more than me, but the Mets are bad. The Mets are really, really bad. And like, look at last night. I love that the Cubs found a way to win Thursday night and finish the sweep. There have been a lot of points in the season where they would not have done that.
Right.
But like 3 of those runs came via Mets miscues. So like the offense definitely was quieter on Thursday, but I don't think we can look past Nico looking better at the plate. Dansby basically going from unusable to a league average hitter in the span of 3 games. Set the Cubs all-time record for RBI in a doubleheader. He had 15 runs batted in four
Yep.
games. So he looked better. Pete doing Pete things, like you said. There are encouraging signs, but again, I think it's it, the Mets are just bad. They're so bad. Show up this weekend, and I'm not saying you have to sweep the Brewers or even win the series, but you have to play competitive baseball. You have to look like you're capable of playing at their level before I'm even gonna let myself believe. It's just the level of competition and just how clean a game Milwaukee plays compared to the absolute circus we saw in Queens this week. It's day and night. But to the Cubs' credit, they took advantage of a struggling opponent. They did not let them up off the mat once they had them down. Finished the sweep. It was big, but I'm kind of one foot in each camp. The Cubs are trending in the right direction, but the Mets are trash.
Yeah, individually, I would say there are some things to like from what the Cubs did. At the very least, they stacked 4 wins together. When the Cubs have gone through this rough patch, we've said if you can stack wins against the bad teams, that does buy you some breathing room. Unfortunately, when the streak of the Cubs playing teams under 500 started, they weren't doing that. They struggled against the Colorado Rockies in Colorado. They struggled against the San Francisco Giants. So the fact that the Cubs knew they were playing a bad team and they truly went out and won 4 games, that in itself is a step forward from what we've seen in the past. I would also even go as far as say with Dansby Swanson, he was getting pitches to hit and pitches to really do damage on throughout his slump, and he just wasn't hitting them. He wasn't timed right. So the fact that his timing looks to be better is another encouraging sign. So to your point, those breadcrumbs that suggest that the Cubs offense at the very least could be about to do something. We still have to get Alex Bregman going. I think that's going to be an important piece to the offense finding consistent success moving forward. So I did like that the offense did take a step forward, to taking advantage of stuff that they weren't doing before. And as a whole, you're stacking wins. The Cubs are 7 games over 500, the first time they at that mark since May. So you have some breathing room, but to your point, in the back of mind was the fact that, like, okay, the Mets truly are bad. And our true test is this week when we face the Milwaukee Brewers. Jake, you touched on it earlier this pod. The pitching probables for this series is hilarious. You have Jacob Mizorowski going tonight. You have Kyler Harrison, I think, going Sunday, and Brandon Woodruff on Sunday. Meanwhile, the Cubs are responding with Colin Ray tonight, TBD tomorrow, which is probably going to be David Peterson, and TBD on Sunday. I have a article coming out closer to the game, But when we truly strip everything out, think about what's the biggest difference when it comes to the Cubs and Brewers, it's pitching. The Brewers have been able to demonstrate time after time that they can develop pitching. The Cubs, meanwhile, haven't. And I think it's clear when you just look at the probables for this series.
If the Cubs somehow win this series, my goodness, that means well for me. I think honestly, one of their best chances to win a game is tonight. It's against Mizorowski. They've done it before multiple times, but it comes down to you have to drive his pitch count up in the first couple innings. You need to see 20 plus pitches an inning. You cannot go up there and just let him blow 3 pitches past you and move on to the next guy. Otherwise, we're going to be talking about a 22 strikeout performance, and I do not want to be
Yeah,
talking about that
easily.
next week. But when they've had success against him, they're seeing a ton of pitches. They're fouling pitches off. They're making him work and driving that pitch count up. Harrison worries me because the guy looks incredible, and I feel like he's just the latest example of the Brewers snagging something off the scrap heap and turning it into an all-star. Brandon Woodruff, we know that track record. He's been a staple in Milwaukee for the better part of a decade. But yeah, and then you flip it over and it's like, okay, Colin Ray. I wrote yesterday, I love Colin Ray. Colin Ray is the most underappreciated Cub of probably the last 5 years because literally
Yeah,
where would we be without him? He stepped
correct.
right
Yeah.
in a whole season of Justin Steele. Now he's doing it for Kate Horton again. No, he's not an all-star. He's not, an ace of a staff, but he goes out there more or less. He gives the Cubs a chance to win, and he eats a ton of innings. Nobody's thrown more innings than Colin Ray in the last 2 years, which is really just sums up the whole of Cubs pitching during that stretch. Um, yeah, the offense. I mean, to your point that you made, like yes, there were breadcrumbs. They were encouraging. We need to see it continue this weekend. If the offense doesn't show up, we're cooked.
Yeah.
You can't expect Colin Ray to go throw 7 shutout innings. I would be very happy if he did. And then, yeah, first glimpse at David Peterson, thrown right into the fire. It's going to be a rowdy environment, going to be a sellout, I'm sure, every day. Um, so, yeah, we'll see, but buckle up.
Yeah, no, it looks like Bryce Wilson is probably going, at the very least, factor into Sunday's game. He was a former White Sox pitcher. This season, he had a minor league deal with the Philadelphia Phillies. He exercised his upward mobility clause last weekend. Cubs claimed him off waivers earlier this week. He was starting mostly for the Phillies AAA affiliate. I would be probably willing to bet that he's going to see at least multiple innings at some point this weekend, probably on Sunday. I want to talk about Kyra Harrison because I think there's a larger point that has to be made when it comes to what type of pitching the Cubs target moving forward. We've made it clear that with the draft coming up, the reasonable argument is that the Cubs should prioritize taking a pitcher in the first round. MLB Pipeline recently did their mock draft. Jim Kellis has the Cubs drafting an outfielder. Pretty much the reason was like, hey, the Cubs have proven to be pretty good at finding a college bat, the one who could rise quickly through the system. And if there's not an arm they like, why deviate from a strategy you know? I think that's in a vacuum not a bad approach. It also made me think, even if the Cubs drafted a pitcher in the first round, a healthy pitcher at that, would we really trust him to be able to develop him? Because we've seen time after time, maybe Edward Cabrera is the latest example of the Cubs bringing in maybe an unfinished product, someone who the Cubs think they can tap his truest potential, but for whatever reason, it just doesn't work. And for Cabrera, if you look at what he was doing with the Marlins last season when he was healthy, there's a clear difference in the type of pitcher he was. Meanwhile, in Milwaukee, Kyra Harrison went from the Giants, went from the Red Sox. Now in Milwaukee, a former top pitching prospect. Milwaukee actually found the thing that's working for him, and he's thriving. And in and of itself, I also think that's the biggest problem with the Cubs is they think they can fix these pitchers, but reality is they might not be able to.
Yeah, weirdly, they're good at fixing bullpen arms. Like, they're good
Yeah,
at that, but they can't figure it out with a starter, and it
yeah.
baffles me. Speaking of which, shout out to old friend Drew Pomeranz back in the yard.
Oh, I just knew it. I just the second he became available, I'm like, damn, the
I,
Cubs are probably going to make a move.
I had a friend who was at in Wrigleyville and saw Drew Pomeranz and had like texted me like 5 minutes after you told me about it, and like just shout out. You're kind of a baseball dog if you see Drew Pomeranz walking around and you recognize him. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, that's impressive recognition.
But yeah, the Brewers clearly have things dialed in. You can see it's an organizational structure that's in place because the Mets thought, oh, we'll poach David Stearns. He'll just do the Brewers thing in New York, but have money. The Cubs thought, hey, we'll poach Counsell. He'll do the Brewers thing in Chicago, but with money. And you see how that's working for the Cubs and Mets. Meanwhile, the Brewers just keep chugging along. Matt Arnold's building an incredible roster. Pat Murphy has been a great manager. I would say he's probably on pace for another Manager of the Year award if the Brewers keep cruising. And meanwhile, the rest of the league, minus the Dodgers, is just left scratching their heads trying to figure out how they do it. But you you can hate the Brewers all you want, but they have figured something out. They are a model organization, and I think that just makes the Cubs' inability to do the same thing even more frustrating.
Kind of makes you wonder what Carter Hawkins' value is to the front office. When he was hired from the Cleveland Guardians, one of the reasons why he was hired was because the Guardians are very good at pitching development. It seems like the Cubs haven't quite taken that step forward under Hawkins with the GM. Again, there's always a question, kind of like when Theo was here, how much of it is Jed? How much of it is Carter? That being said, for everything that's gone on with the Cubs season this year, if there truly is a fall guy, I think maybe it's Carter Hawkins. Maybe Jed does look for an executive who's more different approach when it comes to pitching development because on that front, it does seem like there's a clear gap between Milwaukee and Chicago. And until the Cubs get closer in that sense, the National League conversation, it's already over. It's going to be the Brewers division until the Cubs figure out what and how to develop pitching.
Yeah, I mean, you hit it on the head. The first couple of years, I would be like, okay, that was kind of fluky. It's fine. The Cubs will get them next year. And at this point, I almost head into every year saying like, nope, the Central runs through Milwaukee until it doesn't. Until the Cubs show that they're ready to reclaim it. But you have to go out and take it. Pat Murphy's teams do not beat themselves. It's not like what we saw in New York this week. You're not going to see a Brewers team go out and make 6 errors one night and two the next. Like they just don't do that. And again, hats off to the Cubs this week for taking advantage of those errors, but you can't count on that when you play good teams like the Brewers. And yeah, like I said, it's an endless pipeline too. You look at that farm system; they could very well go out and get Tarek Skubal and have an absolute monster rotation headed into October, and still have a really they probably still have a top 10 farm system after that trade. They're that
Yeah.
deep. A crazy pipeline of talent on the way. We know what they've already done and continue to do at the big league level. So again, Cubs have to figure things out, but one team that does not need to figure much out right now is Milwaukee.
What's the best case scenario for the Cubs waking up on Monday for the series?
A miracle, Jordan. A miracle. A three-game sweep of the Brewers. You're what 4 out in the division, top in the
Yeah.
wild card race. That's the best case scenario. But again, I think I spoke to it earlier. I'm trying to not just live and die on do you sweep the series, do you win the series. I just want them to play competitive, clean baseball. Don't beat yourself. Grind out at bats. I don't want to see Dansby Swanson go back to what he's been doing for 2 months, or Nico revert back to his slump. If they're stringing together good at bats and they lose 3-2, 2-1, 5-4, I'll feel okay about it. I won't like looking at
Yeah.
this, but it's just we haven't seen consistently clean baseball from the Cubs in a while. This is a really good opportunity to put your best foot forward in admittedly a less than ideal situation. We talked about the pitching matchups. You're not going in full strength. You're not even going in half. But
Yeah.
it's an opportunity that if the offense gets going, if Pete is that spark plug and keeps up his insane June, and you get contributions from Swanson, and maybe Bregman starts getting some things going, Nico looks good. There is a world where they can win the series, but it's going to be an all hands on deck, and you can't have guys, especially in the bullpen, you can't have guys come in and just get absolutely shelled like last Saturday against Toronto. You've got to have everyone put their best foot forward to have a chance to win this series. But no question about it, it's an uphill battle.
Yeah, it definitely can't be like when Milwaukee came to Wrigley Field earlier this season and just in every game, it was clear Milwaukee was a better team. You wanna get through these 3 games with the belief that the Cubs, even with everything that has gone wrong with injuries and the bullpen, that they can still carry the weight against Milwaukee. I think you go in with the expectation of you're probably going to lose 2 of 3. You definitely don't want to get swept. If you get swept, I think that officially ends the hope in the National League Central in terms of winning the division. Not that there's much hope left. But you definitely want to walk away knowing that with everything that's gone wrong for the Cubs this season, with all the injuries, with how the offense has looked up and down, if you hold your own against Milwaukee, that's an encouraging sign for what still can be the season. It's a miracle in itself that the Cubs haven't just completely cradled and are 7 games above 500 at this point. But it very much feels like one way or another, this is going to be the series that determines what's truly next for the Cubs.
Yeah, you spoke about there not being much hope. Fangraphs heading into the opener tonight in Milwaukee gives the Cubs an 8.5% chance of winning the division. Meanwhile, the Brewers have an 83.2% chance of winning the division. Uh,
Yeah.
the Cubs' playoff odds are up to almost 60% again, so that's encouraging. But Jed Hoyer spoke to it like you want first round buys, you want to win the division, like all that stuff is at play here. And yeah, it's a big weekend, no doubt about it.
Yeah. So hopefully we wake up on Monday. Things are looking kind of like they do now. Cubs are maybe getting ready to turn the corner. After Milwaukee, they do have a series against the San Diego Padres. Much like the Mets, that's a team you can take advantage, but the Cubs have to get past this weekend. We will be back with you on Monday, of course. In the meantime, follow Cubby's Crib on YouTube, subscribe to Cubby's Crib on Apple Podcasts. Those are where all the episodes go. Leave us 5 stars, give us a review on the Apple Podcast. Anything Cubs related, we'll give you a mention on the pod. We will be also talking about the draft here within the next couple of episodes. It's coming at you the middle of July. Going to be a big moment for the Cubs organization. Until then, I'm Jordan. I almost said I'm Jake. But until then, I'm Jordan. That's Jake. Hopefully the Cubs can not make us miserable this weekend.